Yo, what's up, guys? So just for the hell of it, I sent my 3D diagram to ChatGPT to see how well it could understand it and explain what was happening in the diagram without me prompting it too much. And surprisingly, it actually did a pretty good job explaining what's happening in the diagram. And the whole reason I want to do this is basically to see how easily understandable my diagram is, because I figure if ChatGPT can understand it and decipher it, then I want to believe that the average person is just as smart as ChatGPT and can also, understand what's happening in this 3D diagram without me having to over-explain it, essentially, guys. And at the end of the day, I believe this is a pretty simple, straightforward diagram, although very different than the normal mainstream belief of the earth we live in or live on or whatever. But at the end of the day, I believe or want to believe it's a pretty straightforward, simple diagram that doesn't need too much explanation. You got a flat, circular earth surrounded in a dome and a giant magnetic mountain outside of that dome in the northern direction. That's essentially the long and short of it. But I think it's not so much a matter of whether or not people understand the diagram, but more so, whether or not people believe the diagram is true. And, whether or not you believe it is going to be based on quite a few things. For example, do you believe the Bible is true? Do you take the Bible literally? Do you believe the Bible could be a scientific book? Do you believe in God? Do you trust NASA? Do you trust modern science? Those would be some of the questions you would need to ask before asking whether or not someone believes in my diagram and believes it to be true. So anyway, guys, let's get into what ChatGPT said about my model. So this is what I said. I said, this is my 3D model of the flat earth according to the Bible. Summarize it to me how you understand it. See, I said, this is my 3D model of the flat earth according to the Bible. Summarize to me how you understand it. And this is what ChatGPT said. So it said, based on the image alone, here's how I understand the cosmological model you're depicting. I'm describing the model as presented, not making a claim about whether it is biblically or scientifically correct. So first it says, the earth is a flat circular plane, which it is. The continents occupy the central region and the outer edge is labeled Antarctica, forming a continuous ring around the known lands. So that's the truth, guys. Antarctica is basically the ice wall. It's a circle of ice that surrounds the earth. And beyond Antarctica, that's where the dome, the firmament, connects to earth. And the sun and moon and stars are inside that dome. So the dome is the same as the sky. It's called a firmament in the Bible. You can read that if you don't believe me in Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 7. So let's continue, guys. Next thing it says, a great mountain stands beyond the Antarctic boundary. The mountain is labeled Mount Zion with a large horseshoe magnet above it marked True North. This suggests the mountain is the ultimate northern reference point or source of the Earth's magnetic north. This is true, guys. Mount Zion is a magnetic mountain, and wherever you are on Earth within the circle of the Earth, a compass dial will point north towards that mountain because the compass dial is magnetically attracted to the mountain, which serves as a giant magnetic source. And this isn't just any mountain. This is God's mountain. That's why it's so powerful. The mountain is essentially the source. That's why all the compasses point north towards this giant magnetic mountain, which is God's mountain, God's throne, all the same thing. Let's continue, guys. And next it says, the compass points towards Mount Zion. So ChatGPT was able to tell based on the image I sent it that I'm depicting a world where compasses point towards Mount Zion, which is what I believe the truth is. So it says, the compass points towards Mount Zion. The transparent compass in the foreground has its red north-seeking needle pointing towards the mountain rather than towards the center of the Earth model. This communicates the idea that north is defined by the location of Mount Zion, which is correct. So that's an important clarification to make, guys, that a lot of flat earthers believe north is center and south is the outer circle, but this contradicts common sense and this contradicts a compass because a compass clearly shows north not as center, but north actually as forward, south as backwards, east as right, and west as left. And with degrees associated with those directions, north is 0, northeast is 45, east is 90, southeast is 135, south is 180, southwest is 225, west is 270, northwest is 315, and then back to north, which is 360 or 0. Okay, so another feature of it, it says, aurora-like lights surround the mountain. The colorful ribbons resemble the aurora borealis and appear to encircle the mountain. Their placement suggests they are associated with the mountain and or the magnetic field represented by the magnet. So that's true, guys. I have aurora borealis, or the northern lights, surrounding Mount Zion, and there's a reason for that. Because, I believe that the northern lights do surround Mount Zion, because Revelation 4:3 says that there's an emerald rainbow around God's throne, and we know God's throne and God's mountain is the same thing, and the color of the northern lights is green, which is emerald. So I believe the emerald rainbow described in Revelation 4:3 surrounding the throne is the northern lights, or aurora borealis, surrounding Mount Zion. So I believe actually that countries who are able to see the northern lights actually might be located closer to Mount Zion geographically, because you're getting a glimpse of the rainbow that surrounds God's mountain or God's throne. Okay, next one. The directional ring illustrates navigation. Around the flat earth is a 360-degree compass rose, north, northeast, east, etc., showing bearings as one would use on a map or compass. So basically, guys, the degrees that surround the flat circular earth line up exactly with the degrees on a compass, which is why compasses only work with flat earth. So again, north is forward, east is right, south is backwards, and west is left. And, they're associated with degrees along the outer circle. Now, another cool thing to note is that magnetic north is 0 degrees north along the outer circle of ice, Antarctica. But true north, a few hundred miles further north, is Mount Zion, which is the giant magnetic mountain. Let's read a little more, guys. The mountain lies beyond the mapped world. Since Antarctica forms the outer ring of the map and the mountain is behind it, your model appears to place Mount Zion outside the inhabited world, beyond the Antarctic boundary. And that's 100% correct. So I believe Mount Zion is outside of the dome of the earth, outside of the firmament. That's essentially where God lives, where God reigns, and humans cannot access outside of the dome. We can't get out of the dome. Unless we die or go to heaven or something like that, then maybe we go to Mount Zion. But for the most part, we're going to be living inside the dome. And, Mount Zion exists outside of the dome. That's where God lives and reigns. That's where the angels are. That's where Jesus is. That's where the saints are in heaven with Jesus and God in Mount Zion. All right, next thing. The theme is biblical symbolism combined with navigation. The names Mount Zion and True North, together with the magnet and compass, convey the idea that biblical Mount Zion is the ultimate reference point for direction, both physically and spiritually. Now, that's an important thing to note, guys, that it says both physically and spiritually, because on a physical level, yes, if you use a compass, it will be literally pointing north towards Mount Zion, towards the source, the giant magnetic mountain that the compass dial is attracted towards. But on a spiritual level, it's kind of really cool when you think about it, that, people talk about a moral compass. And if you think about it, if we're all made in the image of God, and I think it's true that deep down we all want a relationship with God. We all want to know our purpose and know our Creator and know why we're here and know that there is a God that exists. And that's why I believe it's cool to think about, our moral compass or spiritual compass pointing north towards heaven, basically, which is Mount Zion, which is our home, guys. So, and then it's summarized. It says, overall, I would summarize the model as follows. It depicts a flat, circular Earth surrounded by Antarctica, with Mount Zion located beyond the Antarctic boundary. Mount Zion is presented as true north, symbolized by a giant magnet, and the Earth's magnetic compass is shown as pointing towards that mountain. The aurora-like lights encircle Mount Zion, reinforcing the idea that this is a source or focal point of the Earth's magnetic field and the true north reference. So yeah, guys, I think, ChatGPT did a pretty good job summarizing my diagram. Let's take one more look at that model. So to summarize, you have a flat 360-degree Earth, flat 360-degree circular Earth, surrounded by a dome, which is the sky, which is called the firmament. You got the sun and moon and stars inside the dome, which Genesis chapter 1, verse 16 through 17 talks about. And as you guys probably know, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The Bible actually describes a circuit that the sun follows. That's, I believe, in Psalm chapter 19. And then outside of the domed circular earth, you have a giant mountain, which is called Mount Zion, which is talked about in Psalm 48, chapter 2, Revelation 14:1, and many other times in the Bible as being God's mountain. You know, Psalm 48:2 says it is the joy of the whole earth, and it's located in the far north, which I clearly have Mount Zion located in the far north, because again, you have magnetic north, which is north along 0 degrees along the circle of ice. But then if you go a few hundred miles further north, you'll reach far north, which is true north, which is where Mount Zion is. So it's pretty cool, guys. You know, you might be wondering, why would NASA or modern science or the modern media lie about this to us and convince us that we're living on a globe rapidly moving and spinning through infinite outer space. And the reason why is because, like anything in life, there is such thing as good and there is such thing as evil. And I believe those organizations are satanic organizations. And basically the purpose of them is to make you think God doesn't exist, make you not believe in God, and make you just believe you're a meaningless speck in infinite outer space and that God doesn't care about you. Because again, these people hate God, they're against God, and they don't want you to know the truth, that God is real, the Bible is true, and that God and Jesus loves you, man. So that's why it's important to spread the truth, especially if that truth lines up with the Bible, which I very clearly explained that it does. And it also lines up with a compass. So I believe it's important to preach the good word and let people know the truth and let people know that the Bible is true, God is real, Jesus is real, and also the true nature of the reality of the earth we live in, that we don't live on a spherical globe rapidly traveling through an infinite outer space. In reality, the earth is flat, surrounded in a dome, and there's a giant God mountain in the northern direction outside of us, which is God's mountain, Mount Zion. So yeah, I think that just about covers it, guys. You know, if you have any questions, feel free to leave one, but that is about it. You know, God is great. You know, as it says in Psalm chapter 145, verse 3, great is the Lord and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable, guys. God's greatness is unsearchable. Think about how tall that mountain is. That mountain represents God's glory and God's greatness and God's love and God's infinite understanding. It's the height of the mountain, guys, that God's, you know, love and power and understanding cannot be measured. That it's so much greater than any of us can even fathom. So hope you enjoy this video and have a good one, guys. God bless.